Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Maybe you would call me Everly Chilton, naive or too trusting. Maybe I was like that once, but not anymore. My husband Harris and I met after graduating from college when we worked in neighboring buildings. We seemed to like each other almost instantly. He was very good-looking and charming. After 5 or 6 dates, we made love, and everyone always got a pleasant moment. Even though we got along well and we had a good rhythm in bed, I was surprised when he asked me to marry him. The reason I was surprised was that I saw photos of all his old girlfriends. He didn't hide them from me, and I didn't hide my past from him either, and they were all well endowed. Each had nice soft curves and probably a cup of DD or more. Also, I don't have nice soft curves. As a result of weekly intense exercise, I have an athletic body. Anyway, Harris and I got married, and my best friend Ashley Morton became my bridesmaid. Ashley's husband Bill, the owner of an event planning company, was kind enough to plan our wedding at cost only. We became and remained great friends with Ashley and Bill, and together we were part of a friendly group of 6 couples. Harris and I agreed on many important things, not the least of which was that we would have at least 2 children, but only after 6 years of marriage. Therefore, I regularly took a contraceptive injection every 3 months, which is important because our love life never really stopped, pleasant 3 or more times a week. In fact, always with a very pleasant moment for each of us. Ashley is a little older than me, so at the time when Harris and I were married for about 3 years, and she and Bill for about 6, she gave up birth control. She told me with a laugh that psychologically it made her a little more excited, and I wish Bill would use me more often. At that time, Harris and I shared almost everything except toothbrushes, and only our cars were different. I have a Prius and he has a Dodge Challenger. He thought my car was too prim, I thought his car was too macho. He hates prim, I hate macho. Plus, while Harris is tidy in our house, his car at least to me looks like a pile of trash, with papers, plastic cups and sports equipment everywhere. So when we go somewhere together, I usually need to throw the trash from the front seat to the back before then I can sit down. On that fateful Saturday in May, we were going to a local minor league baseball game and were supposed to meet Bill and Ashley there. For some reason, I was ready before him, which happens only 10% of the time. So I did a more complete job than usual, cleaning his front seat before sitting down, even sprayed it with detergent and wiped it. Just before I finished wiping the seat, I noticed a small box under the seat. The label said, "Trojan Set of Pleasures." For the rest of my story to make sense, you need to know that my 2 passions, besides exercise, are theater and cooking. I have been an amateur actor for most of my life and participated in a public theater production just 10 months before this momentous day. Also, I like to experiment with all kinds of spices and unusual dishes, which in 90% of cases are well received by everyone who uses them. Having done one of my best acting jobs, I was warm and playful in my conversations with Harris on the way to the game, at the same time angry inside, and was already working on a plan of what I would do about it. Despite the negative impact that my discovery had on my mood, I had a good time outwardly. I was tempted to tell Ashley about my dilemma, but then I realized that I had to deal with it alone and gather a lot more information before I made a decision on all aspects of my investigation and probably some kind of revenge. One of the home team's players wore the number 7. I secretly searched for him in the program. His name was Derek Voorhees. He was 23 years old. I was 26, 6 feet 3 inches, 1.9 meters, tall, weighed 220 pounds, 100 kilograms. He studied at Chapel Hill in North Carolina, his first year on our AAA minor league team, and he led the league in home runs. Using a long-studied technique, I became fixated on Derek as my anger began to boil over. Much later, after dinner with Bill, Ashley, and another couple, when we went to bed, I was not in the mood to use Harris. However, during love, I imagined that I was using someone else. Harris must have really liked our love, because then, as our sweaty bodies puffed, he whispered, "You really outdid yourself. Everly, you must be the best lover in the state." Fun, yeah, was the most I could say in response without anger breaking through my facade. Fortunately, that was enough to make him snore after a quick kiss and a short hug. Surprisingly, I fell asleep soon after, convincing myself that I needed to get a good night's sleep to think about my next move. As I was getting out the ingredients for making pancakes, my eyes fell on one of my homemade spices, a habanero-based mixture that I use for Mexican dishes. I came up with an idea that made me whistle when I was making pancakes. Harris ate 6 pancakes. After breakfast, while Harris was washing our cars in front of the house, I took out a pin and an eyedropper. I knew the dosage was unlikely to give me all the information I needed to catch Harris, but it was a good revenge before I went to hire a private investigator. I returned the Trojan box to exactly where it was under the passenger seat in Harris's Challenger and then tried to put it out of my mind. I work from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I made love to Harris on Monday and Tuesday. Already on Thursday, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Ashley called me. "Everly, something is seriously wrong." The sound she made when she said those words were frightening, so I immediately took the keys to my Prius and drove to her house just a mile away. Fortunately, the local clinic was also nearby, and there was a parking space right in front of it. I helped her get in and even checked her in with an insurance card and an ID card from her purse. After that, I asked the nurse if I could come in. Obviously, the nurse thought that I was her sister, since our facial features, height and hair are very similar. Only the size of our boobs, the size and shape of our buttocks easily distinguish us when we are dressed, and muttered what I interpreted as yes. I went to the door to the room, and the sound insulation wasn't that good. I heard Ashley say, "It started during Love at Noon." I didn't go in, but went out into the lobby. As hard as it was to believe, I couldn't think of any other rational explanation. Fortunately, I had 20 minutes before Ashley came out still bow-legged, but with a much less distorted and sweaty face, so I regained my composure and relied on my acting skills. On the way home, I asked Ashley briefly and delicately, "Did they tell you what it was?" They think it was an allergic, reaction to the new one. The skincare cream that I used for my thighs and perineum." It was a lie that Ashley stammered out. "How soon will you feel better?" I asked with an inner laugh. Probably in 2 or 3 days." "You won't have to make babies for a while," I grinned. Ashley didn't chuckle back. If there were any doubts, and there weren't any, they disappeared when I looked at Harris's red-hot crotch while he was in the shower. He took time off from Love when I pretended to try to start him that night. "I'm sorry, Everly, but for some reason I feel bad tonight. Not sick, just bad." "It's okay, honey, get well," I replied with obvious concern, laughing to myself. The next step was to catch them red-handed. I met with a private investigator, but when I found out how much it cost, I wasn't sure I could hide such a sum from Harris. However, what I could do was talk to Bill, but I had to do it right. The following Monday, I had to fake a moment for the second time in my life with Harris because I couldn't imagine using a guy playing baseball. I invited Bill to lunch on Tuesday. He was a little surprised, but gladly agreed to meet. He was puzzled when I told him it was about a surprise for Ashley, so he wouldn't tell her anything. I met Bill in a secluded place. He laughingly commented on the lack of charm there. "This is a business meeting, Bill," I replied seriously. "Oh shit. What is it?" "Before I start, I need to get a written guarantee from you." And I handed him a simple one-page document. This provided that in exchange for me providing him with valuable confidential information, he would keep this information secret for 45 days unless I gave him permission to disclose it earlier. It provided for damages in the amount of $25,000 in the event of a violation. Bill raised his eyebrows, stared into my eyes, and obviously came to the conclusion that the information was serious, and we both signed and dated the document. I told Bill what I had learned and that I needed his help in hiring a detective. He needed to pay using his business account, and when it's all over, I'll give him half back. Bill was just picking at his food in frustration. I had more time to adjust, and I ate everything on my plate. Although this place didn't have comfort, it did have good food. After lunch, Bill and I went straight to the detective's office and signed the contract. We gave him written permission to monitor our houses inside and out and photos of Ashley and Harris. Bill and I designed fake trips out of town over the next week. Me on Tuesday and Wednesday until Thursday morning, Bill on Wednesday and Thursday, so that there would be no suspicion that we were out of town at the same time. During my fictitious absence, I worked in Bill's office, and he worked in my business office, not at home. We met with the detective on Saturday after our fake trips. Unfortunately, the news turned out to be what we expected. Ashley and Harris made love 3 times from Wednesday evening to Thursday morning in the guest room at Bill's house. and it was recorded in bright color or infrared with clear sound. The question was, what should I do about it? After talking to a private investigator, Bill and I went to the park to discuss something. We anticipated this, so we thought about it for a while. I spoke up. Bill, no matter what happens next, my friendship with Ashley is over, and my marriage with Harris is over too. I won't interfere with what you decide to do, but I also want to take some revenge on both of them. More than revenge with the help of Habanero? He chuckled, even though the situation wasn't funny at all. Of course more. I snorted. I think I want to try to save my marriage, Bill said with the air of a hanged dog. It will depend on how Ashley reacts when I tell her. Okay, but remember our contract. I need a few more days to decide what to do, so don't pin this on Ashley until I give you permission to act. I promise it will take much less time than 45 days. Bill shook his head dejectedly. We hugged briefly, and he sadly left. That weekend, I had to fake another moment with Harris. On Monday morning, when I was looking through the local morning newspaper, I looked at the front page. On the front page of the sports section was a photo of Derek Voorhees tipping his hat to the hometown baseball crowd. The caption mentioned that he set a team record by hitting 3 homers in one game. I have an idea. Before I reveal my idea, I need to tell you 2 things to make it make sense. One flattering, but probably proven truth, and one unflattering, but definitely provable truth. 1. My hard body is considered hot and my face is cute. 2. When I am offended, I am an evil, nasty, overly vindictive fool, as half a dozen people from my past will confirm by putting their hand on the Bible. That Monday morning, I caught Bill in between meetings. Bill, you can run into Ashley as soon as it's convenient for you. However, there are 2 conditions on which I insist that you give her the opportunity to stay married. I need to know one thing, and I need her temporary consent to the other. All right, Bill replied cautiously. I want you to get her to admit how many times, for what period of time she and Harris made love, and who initiated it. And I need you to make her promise not to tell Harris what we know until I'm ready. Can you do that? I concluded, holding both his hands and looking into his eyes. After a long pause, he replied, Good. I'll talk to her on Wednesday, and then I'll call you on your cell phone. Bill called me on Wednesday evening and said that Ashley tearfully confessed that she had been having an affair with Harris for over a year, usually once a week, and it started with him approaching her with the words, I adore you. My head almost exploded. Now I was ready for revenge on the scorched earth. I believed that Harris would want to save the marriage and that I could get him to do something that would rip out his insides. Of course, I had no intention of saving the marriage, but he didn't know that. If he's not interested in saving the marriage, then I'll come up with another win-win plan. I didn't wait. I threw the case in his face, including a couple of incriminating photos from sessions recorded by our private investigator the following Wednesday evening, screaming like a banshee. I called him all sorts of names, destroyed 2 of his memorabilia from his youth, and threw his pillow and related items from our bedroom into the guest room. Then I closed and locked our bedroom door and installed a newly purchased door bar between the door handle and the floor. I ignored the pleas and pleas at the door and did get some sleep, thinking about how amazing my revenge would be. Harris begged and crawled for the next 3 days. Eventually, I heard words that were music to my ears. Everly, we can get through this. I love you very much and I want you, and me to have children. Please don't file for divorce. I'll do anything to stay married. Anything. Bullshit, I growled. You say that, but you won't do it. I guarantee that you are too damn weak and care too little about me to complete the one simple task that I need to give our marriage another chance. After that, I turned to leave. He gently grabbed my arm. Please, Everly dear. I'm serious, he pleaded, and there seemed to be real tears in his eyes. I stopped and stared at him. He got down on his knees. Okay, I giggled. Arrange for me to spend the night with Derek Voorhees at a local luxury hotel. Then I turned around and went to the garage to get into my Prius. You can't be serious? You mean the baseball player? I'll never be able to do that. Even if I agreed to it, I don't have a way to do it. Here are some of his lamentations. I stopped at the garage door, turned to him, and with venom dripping from my mouth, growled. I told you that you're not just a fucking con artist, you're also a liar. You said anything and lied. Fuck off. Tell me where you want the divorce papers to be filed. Then I ran out to the sound of his faint cry, "Wait." At that time, Ashley tried to contact me. After avoiding her for a week, I took her call. After she confessed how sorry she was, to which I replied that she was only sorry that she had been caught, she asked how I found out everything. "We were so careful, and believe it or not, we never disrespected you," she whimpered. I didn't respond to her irrational whining, but I saw no reason not to partially tell her. "I get it because you're really bad," I giggled. "Did I screw up?" "What is it?" she asked with real shock. "Hell yes. I thought the story about the allergy to skincare products was fake, and I was sure of it when I was about to enter the room at the clinic and heard you tell the doctor that you had just had love." Ashley gasped loudly. "Bill wasn't there, and I realized that you had an affair on the side, and you disgusted me." Imagine my surprise when that same night I saw Harris with a red-hot crotch. After that, I hired a private investigator, and the rest is history. "You're such a fool that you had the nerve to ask me to take you to the clinic right after you used my husband. Don't mess with me anymore. You're dead to me," I shouted before interrupting the conversation. It was frosty in our house when we coexisted for the next few days. I refused to have lunch with Harris. I listened indifferently to his pleas for some alternatives to stay together. When Monday evening came next week, I showed him, but had not yet officially filed the divorce papers, along with a draft lawsuit against Ashley for alienation of affection, just for effect. A completely fictitious lawsuit, not only because it is not an offense in our state, but also because Bill and I have an agreement that none of us would do such a thing, and asked where to serve him. He really couldn't stand it and started crying. I didn't give him any mercy. He finally regained his composure and muttered, "If I agree to your proposal, it will be just for one night with Voorhees, and you will not file for divorce." Of course, I lied. He lied to me for over a year, so I had no reason to tell him the truth. "Have you already made an agreement?" "I swear I'm working on it, but it's complicated," was his typical response. Then one day he said, "You know, what might help is if I showed him a naked picture of you." "Okay," I grinned. "But not a digital photo, but a print in a closed transparent case that will be returned to me as soon as he looks at it." I prepared myself and found a transparent case that will simply provide a white color if you try to photograph it. I asked Bill, not Harris, to take 2 nude photos of me, front and back. I was pleased to see how Bill's eyes widened and sweat stood out on his forehead when he took photos, and how he couldn't utter a word when he looked at me while I was slowly getting dressed. I do not know how Harris did it. Derek must like fit women. But 3 days after I gave Harris the photos, sweating heavily and in a meek voice, he muttered, I got Derek to agree. I'm free next Monday evening. I'll get a room at 4, of the season. Are you really going to do this?" "What?" I growled. "Do you think you can use Ashley for a whole year and I won't go through with it? I'm waiting for the best love of my life, you fool. And don't ask me again if I'm going to go through with it. Just give me the key to the room and tell me when to meet him after you sign this statement," I said, throwing a 1-page contract drawn up by my lawyer on the kitchen table. The contract stated that what I would do as agreed would have no effect if either of us ever filed for divorce. Although I didn't really believe that Harris would arrange my date, I like to be prepared. So I searched the internet and found a lot of articles about Derek during his time as the star of the North Carolina baseball team, including 2 that mentioned his college girlfriend. She had a distinctive name, and I was able to track her down and talk to her on the phone. The only reason they broke up with her was because she didn't want the life of a baseball player's wife, and it was clear that he wanted to play for at least another 15 years. Derek's college girlfriend told me 2 interesting things about him. 1, despite the fact that he is a super stallion, he is modest and unsure of his love skills. 2, he has a phobia about contracting an STD, and therefore they both had tests every few months. Surprisingly, on Monday morning, Harris delivered me a key card for room 1725 of the Four Seasons Hotel. "Derek wants to meet you at 5 p.m. for dinner," he squeaked in a voice as weak as a mouse's. "Give me $140 for dinner," I replied. After Harris left, I took the rest of the day off and had a massage, crotch haircut, pedicure, manicure, and facials. After the SBA, I went straight to the Four Seasons. Up close, Derek turned out to be even more handsome and muscular than I thought. As expected, he was not a fool. He graduated from Chapel Hill in New York. What surprised me was that he was extremely charming and funny. Derek tried to ask about my arrangement with Harris, but I interrupted him. Holding his hand and looking into his beautiful azure eyes, I said, "We're not going to talk about this, Derek. You can look at it as if someone gave you an expensive call girl for the night, with whom you can do whatever you want, but without pain. And you don't even have to care whether she is experiencing this moment or not." I said this to ease any performance pressure he might have, as his ex-girlfriend warned me. Then I continued, "Can you do it?" "I can do it," he chuckled. "Here is a receipt from my doctor, dated last month, that I received my 3-month contraceptive injection, and a laboratory report just 2 days ago that I am free of STDs. He smiled even wider, but didn't say anything. Derek and I had a very pleasant conversation over dinner. I'm only 3 years older than him, so we didn't belong to different generations, and we had a lot to talk about. It felt like it was just a first date between people who wanted to be with each other. The only difference was my initiative. After a light dinner, we walked hand in hand through the beautiful grounds of the hotel and the adjacent park, where children played baseball and young people played volleyball. After a leisurely 45-minute walk, we returned directly to the front door of the hotel. "It's time to get a payback from your dear call girl," I whispered in his ear, and then quickly kissed him on the lips. Obviously, that was the right thing to say. His smile grew even wider. When we went up to room 1725, I playfully pushed Derek onto the main sofa, knelt down and took off his shoes and socks, lightly rubbing my fingers over his bare skin. Then I stood up, kicked off my high-heeled shoes, grabbed his arms and lifted him to his feet. I slowly and erotically unbuttoned his shirt, making complimentary or carnal sounds at the same time, threw the shirt aside and held out my hands, inviting him to undo the buttons of my blouse. "Yummy," I drooled. With these words, he quickly picked me up in his arms, carried me to the 4-poster double bed and threw me on the luxurious bedspread. Between kisses, I muttered, "You removed my spine. My whole body is tingling, and I really lost consciousness from sensory overload." After some bliss, Derek said, "We're both too sweaty. Let's take the covers off the bed, take a shower, and then get under the covers." "Sounds good to me," I grinned. The shower cabin was richly decorated with a variety of shower heads at different heights. We heated up the water and then lathered each other up. I came to my senses a little. He dried me with a fluffy towel, picked me up again and carried me to the 4-poster bed, and then snuggled up to me under the covers, completely wrapping me in his arms. I almost never sleep after 6:30 in the morning. When my eyes finally opened the next morning in the same position as during my dreamy love in the middle of the night, the room was bright, and the clock next to it showed 8:37. I slipped out of bed, did my chores, took a quick shower, and went back to bed. Derek was sitting on the bed with a grin. When he got up to go to the bathroom, I pressed my naked body against him. "I'm not done with you yet," I growled. "Woe is me," he sighed. He returned shortly after I heard the shower stop working. Derek had a "damn, that's great" look on his face, because his only activity was pinching me while I was using him. I briefly lost consciousness for the 3rd time in the morning. Sometime later, I woke up abruptly, looked at the clock, which showed 10:32, and then poked Derek in the ribs. "Wake up, Rip Van Winkle," I giggled. "Checkout time is 11 a.m., so get your ass out of bed." We both got out of bed and used the toothbrushes and mouthwash provided by the hotel. "How about a quick shower?" Derek chuckled. "Hell no. My poor little kitty won't recover from the abuse of your snake for a week. Plus, I like to feel your liquid inside me and hope it will leak out all day. Every milliliter of leakage reminds me of us." I kissed him quickly on the lips. Since we didn't have any luggage to pack, we went down to the checkout at 11:01 a.m. and then went to the restaurant to have breakfast. We had a perfectly cheerful conversation, occasionally holding hands or touching feet with each other. When we both realized that it was approaching 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he insisted on paying. "Because you embarrassed me by paying for dinner?" We got up to leave. After leaving the hotel, we hugged. I looked into his eyes and said, "Last night was supposed to be just for you, but in the end it was more for me. I'm sorry." Derek laughed heartily. "It must be some kind of alternate universe where a red-hot woman gives me the love of my life and then apologizes. The vision of your body and face is burned into my ID card to stay forever," he chuckled. We kissed each other quickly, and then he said, "So now you're going back to your husband as a faithful wife?" "That's what I told him," I smiled. I answered his question vaguely for two reasons. First of all, I didn't want to lie to him and tell him that I was going back to Harris because I was divorcing his ass. The second reason was that my time with Derek was so amazing for both of us that I was afraid he would want to sleep with me again. I probably would have been too weak to resist, but I didn't want to cheat on Harris. Until the divorce is final, I will not make love to anyone else except in this case with the certified consent of Harris, as I did not want to descend to the level of Harris. I wasn't in love with Derek, although it probably wouldn't have taken long to fall in love. I was very pleased to see how Harris was humiliated by my night with Derek. I shyly did not go into details, but smiled slyly. A fantastic revenge has been accomplished. Over the next 2 weeks, I used Harris out of charity several times while finalizing negotiations for a new job in Washington, far from my current location. I also arranged for a warehouse and a shipping company there, and rented an apartment in Northern Virginia for a few months. Harris was surprised and really angry when I handed him the divorce papers 15 days after my night with Derek and told him that all messages would be through my lawyer and that I was leaving town. This time, instead of begging, he ranted, calling me a liar and a Jezebel. It had no effect on me, and I left for DC an hour after he was served. He should have been glad that I applied on the basis of irreconcilable differences and not adultery, and asked to divide the assets only 50-50. I have already withdrawn my 50% of liquid assets. The ink on my copy of the divorce resolution dried up just a couple of months ago when I was cleaning my rented apartment in Northern Virginia on Saturday. My new job was really a success, and I was planning to move to a nicer place sometime in the next month. I dated a few times after my divorce was finalized, but no one rang my bells, and they weren't interesting enough even for one night. In old shorts, a worn-out t-shirt, and dirty slippers, with my hair down and no makeup, I was doing a belated cleaning in my apartment when the doorbell rang. Since I lived in a safe neighborhood, I opened the door without first looking through the peephole. If I had looked through the peephole, I probably wouldn't have opened it, considering how ugly I looked at that moment. "Derek?" I almost screamed when I saw who rang my doorbell. "Hi, Everly," he grinned. "You look great." The poor boy must have lost his eyesight. I wondered if that meant he couldn't play baseball anymore. "What? Why, what are you doing here?" I stammered. "Let me in and I'll tell you," he grinned. I moved away so as not to block the entrance. He came in and hugged me tightly, and then we both sat on the sofa in the living room. The answer to the question consists of many parts. He began with a grin that seemed to widen. The first part is that I was promoted to the major leagues and traded to the Washington Nationals after signing a 5-year contract. I have a new luxury condo less than a mile away. The second reason is that I finally found you. I asked my agent to look through the court records and found out that you had filed for divorce, so I asked him to start looking. Fortunately, your name is quite unique. I've never known Everly before, even if married and maiden names aren't that unusual, so I found you about a week before I signed my contract. I recently returned from spring training, and tomorrow is my opening day at home. I have an invitation, which I hope you will use. "Why? Why did you track me down?" I muttered. Derek laughed. "If you need to ask about it, you must be the best actress in the world, because I thought you liked it when we met for the first time, as much as I did. Simply put, I want a relationship with you." I paused for a moment and then said, "A relationship, not a one-night stand like with a buddy?" "Yes, relationships. I was attracted to your personality as much as your looks, and considering that you gave me the best love of my life, the last thing I want is another one-night stand. It would ruin me for all other women in the future and probably ruin my career, as I would suffer too much for not being with you." I swallowed hard. "Do you really think I look pretty like I did today? Or was it just a casual comment to get into my panties? Are you really worried about how you look today?" He chuckled. Then, grinning but serious at the same time, he said, "The answer to your question is yes, both. I think you look incredibly beautiful the way you are. I'm not really sure how what happened next actually happened. After that, everything happened quickly. I met Derek's parents and sister on the opening day of his house, unsurprisingly because my place was next to theirs. We seemed to get along great. I moved into Derek's new house with him a week after the opening. After the end of the season, We got married. Unlike his college girlfriend, I didn't mind the life of a major league player's wife, because when he returned home from trips, love was just magical. He has now signed his second, major, contract with the Nationals, and I am pregnant with our second child. Once a week, I draft and then delete an email to Harris and Ashley before sending it, thanking them for cheating, and then laughing because their red-hot crotches are responsible for my red-hot love life.